The shipping manifest looked routine. 23 industrial equipment containers departing Norfolk Naval Station. Destination listed as Allied military contractors across Eastern Europe. Standard procedure, standard cargo, standard routing through established logistics channels that had operated without incident for years. Except this shipment would never reach its listed destination, because hidden among legitimate military hardware sat 42 Javelin anti-tank missile systems, 12 next-generation light anti-tank weapons, and supporting launch equipment, stolen from active U.S. military inventory and diverted into a sophisticated trafficking network that had been operating undetected for 18 months. The weapons were already loaded, transfer scheduled for 72 hours, final buyers confirmed, and waiting in 3 separate conflict zones. ATF Trigger had 48 hours to stop weapons designed to destroy armored vehicles from reaching terrorist organizations planning mass casualty attacks across 2 continents. The investigation began 6 months earlier when ATF weapons tracing analysts noticed an anomaly. A single Javelin system recovered from a failed terrorist attack in sub-Saharan Africa carried serial numbers matching U.S. military inventory, supposedly destroyed in controlled demolition exercises. The weapons should not exist. Their recovery from an active terrorist cell 8,000 miles from their logged destruction site triggered immediate federal investigation. ATF Explosives and Weapons Division launched joint operations with FBI Counterterrorism, Defense Criminal Investigative Service, and Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Initial focus. How did one system escape destruction protocols? Investigators audited demolition records, interviewed ordnance disposal personnel, examined chain of custody documentation spanning 3 years of weapons lifecycle management. The audit revealed disturbing patterns. Weapons marked for destruction showed inconsistent documentation. Disposal certificates listed serial numbers that did not match photographic evidence from demolition sites. Weight measurements for destroyed materials came in significantly under expected totals for the quantities reportedly processed. Someone was documenting weapons as destroyed while diverting functional systems into illegal channels. Investigators identified the source within 4 weeks. A logistics coordinator at a military depot had access to both destruction scheduling and inventory databases. Cross-referencing his duty roster against documented anomalies revealed he was present for every suspicious demolition event over 18 months. Surveillance detected meetings with known arms brokers. Financial analysis uncovered offshore accounts receiving regular deposits totaling $800,000, payments matching the timing of weapons marked destroyed, but never actually processed. The coordinator was arrested in a controlled operation designed to preserve investigative momentum. Under interrogation, facing decades in federal prison, he provided details of the trafficking network. But his information revealed the operation was far larger than investigators initially suspected. The single recovered Javelin was not an isolated theft. It was one unit from a sophisticated distribution network that had already diverted hundreds of weapon systems over 18 months. The network operated through corrupted military logistics channels. The coordinator would identify high-value weapons scheduled for legitimate destruction: Javelins, anti-tank guided missiles, portable launch systems, targeting equipment. He altered documentation to show weapons destroyed while physically diverting them to a storage facility operated by a defense contractor with legitimate access to military installations. The contractor concealed stolen weapons among authorized equipment, then routed them through his company's established shipping network. From the storage facility, weapons moved in consolidated shipments, disguised as standard military hardware transfers. The defense contractor maintained contracts with allied nations, providing legitimate cover for international weapons shipments. Stolen systems were hidden among authorized cargo, complete with falsified end-user certificates and export documentation that would pass routine customs inspection. The weapons traveled through established military logistics chains. the same trusted channels used for legitimate defense cooperation. But instead of reaching Allied military forces, the shipments were intercepted at transshipment points by corrupt logistics personnel paid to redirect specific containers. The stolen weapons were separated from legitimate cargo, then moved into commercial shipping networks controlled by international arms trafficking organizations. From there, the weapons entered black market distribution channels serving conflict zones, terrorist organizations, and criminal networks across 3 continents. The coordinator's confession provided investigators with the network's current operation. A major shipment was in motion. 42 Javelin systems, 12 NLOs, launch equipment, targeting systems, and technical manuals, the largest single diversion in the network's 18-month operation. Total street value exceeded $12 million. Military value, capabilities that could alter the balance of power in multiple active conflicts. The weapons had been stolen from military inventory over 6 months through the established falsified destruction process. They had been stored at the defense contractor's facility, concealed among legitimate equipment awaiting international shipment. 3 days ago, they were loaded into shipping containers, alongside authorized military hardware destined for Eastern European Allied forces. The containers departed Norfolk Naval Station 72 hours ago, currently in transit to a major European port, where corrupt logistics personnel would separate stolen weapons from legitimate cargo. From the European transshipment point, the weapons were scheduled to move in 3 separate directions. 14 Javelin systems headed to sub-Saharan Africa, where terrorist organizations had already paid $2 million and were planning coordinated attacks on peacekeeping forces and civilian government targets. 16 Javelin systems and 8 NLOWs were routed to Middle Eastern extremist networks that had confirmed their intent to use the weapons against civilian infrastructure. Oil facilities, power plants, water treatment centers serving populations exceeding 500,000 people. The remaining weapons and all support equipment were destined for a South American cartel that had been conducting low-intensity warfare against government forces. With these advanced systems intended to escalate violence and expand territorial control, timeline analysis revealed the urgency. The shipment would reach the European transshipment point in 72 hours. Corrupt personnel were already positioned to receive the containers. Separation of stolen weapons from legitimate cargo was scheduled to occur within 6 hours of arrival. Once separated, the weapons would move immediately into 3 separate transportation networks: air cargo to Africa, overland routes to the Middle East, maritime shipping to South America. Within 96 hours of separation, the weapons would be in the hands of their final buyers, beyond recovery and operational for immediate deployment. Intelligence analysis detailed what those deployments would look like. The African terrorist organization had conducted surveillance on 3 targets: a United Nations peacekeeping base housing 270 personnel, a government ministry building in a capital city with daily civilian traffic exceeding 4,000 people, and protected convoy route used for humanitarian aid delivery. Javelin systems would provide the capability to destroy armored vehicles from concealed positions over 2,000 meters away, turning protected targets into mass casualty events. The Middle Eastern extremist network had published planning materials indicating their intention to use anti-tank missiles against critical infrastructure. Javelin systems could penetrate reinforced concrete from extended range, allowing attacks on facilities that were currently considered protected by physical security barriers. Oil refineries, power generation stations, water treatment plants, targets where a single successful strike could create cascading failures affecting hundreds of thousands of civilians, generating humanitarian crises and regional instability. The South American cartel's intentions were equally concerning. Intelligence indicated they planned to use advanced anti-tank weapons to attack government military convoys, permanently altering the balance of power in contested regions. Current cartel weapons could engage light vehicles and infantry. Javelin systems would give them the capability to destroy main battle tanks and heavily armored personnel carriers, eliminating the government's primary tactical advantage and potentially triggering escalated violence across multiple provinces. ATF Trigger coordinated with international law enforcement and military partners. The investigation had identified the network, tracked the shipment, and confirmed the timeline. But stopping the operation required precise execution across multiple jurisdictions. The stolen weapons were currently aboard a U.S.-flagged vessel in international waters. Legal authority existed to intercept, but the operation had to occur before the ship reached port, before the weapons were separated and dispersed into 3 different trafficking channels. Federal prosecutors secured warrants for the defense contractor, the shipping company, and all identified network participants. FBI agents positioned surveillance teams at the contractor's facility. NCIS coordinated with naval authorities to track the vessel's exact location. Interpol notified European law enforcement of the inbound shipment and requested cooperation for the interdiction operation. ATF explosives specialists prepared to secure and identify the diverted weapon systems once recovered. 48 hours before the scheduled European port arrival, U.S. Coast Guard intercepted the vessel in international waters under authority of weapons smuggling interdiction. Boarding teams located and secured the containers holding stolen weapons. 42 Javelin systems were recovered. Every serial number matched military inventory, logged as destroyed over the previous 6 months. 12 NLAW systems, launch equipment, targeting systems, technical manuals, all items stolen from active U.S. military stocks. Total weight of recovered weapons exceeded 8,000 pounds. Not one system reached its intended buyers. Simultaneous operations executed across 3 countries. FBI raided the defense contractor's facility, seizing complete records of the 18-month operation and recovering an additional 23 weapon systems staged for the next scheduled shipment. NCIS arrested the military logistics coordinator and 4 accomplices who had participated in falsifying destruction documentation. European authorities detained 6 corrupt logistics personnel positioned to receive and redirect the containers. International law enforcement coordinated operations against the trafficking network's leadership. 14 arrests across 5 countries, dismantling the distribution infrastructure that had moved stolen weapons for over a year. The network's complete operation was mapped through seized communications and financial records. Over 18 months, they had diverted 197 weapon systems from U.S. military inventory, Javelins, NLAWs, anti-tank guided missiles, portable launch systems. Total estimated street value exceeded $38 million. The weapons had reached 12 different conflict zones, supplied to terrorist organizations, extremist networks, and criminal cartels operating across 4 continents. But the current shipment, the largest single operation, never reached its destinations. 42 Javelin systems that would have been deployed against peacekeepers, civilians, and critical infrastructure were secured before transfer. 12 NLAW systems destined for attacks on government forces were recovered before delivery. 3 separate terrorist and criminal organizations paid millions of dollars for weapons they would never receive. Their planned attacks, detailed in seized communications, were prevented by the absence of capabilities they were depending on to execute mass casualty operations. Forensic analysis of the recovered weapons revealed how close the operation came to succeeding. The Javelin systems were fully functional, complete with launch units and targeting systems. Technical manuals provided detailed operational instructions in 3 languages, prepared specifically for buyers with limited training. The weapons were packaged for immediate deployment. Batteries charged, targeting systems calibrated, ready to fire within hours of delivery. If the shipment had reached the European transshipment point, if the separation had occurred as scheduled, these weapons would have been operational in terrorist hands within 96 hours. The African peacekeeping base would have faced 14 Javelin systems, capable of destroying every armored vehicle in the compound from positions over 2 kilometers away. Intelligence analysis projected casualties exceeding 150 personnel in the initial attack, with follow-on operations against responding forces and civilian evacuations. The United Nations compound housed international peacekeepers from 7 countries. The attack would have represented the deadliest single incident against peacekeeping forces in the mission's history. The Middle Eastern infrastructure targets represented even broader risk. Oil refineries serving regional populations, power plants providing electricity to cities exceeding 500,000 residents, water treatment facilities critical to civilian health and safety. A single Javelin strike could penetrate reinforced concrete barriers and destroy critical equipment, creating cascading failures affecting hundreds of thousands of civilians. The extremist network's communications indicated they intended coordinated strikes against 3 facilities simultaneously, generating maximum chaos and humanitarian crisis to advance their political objectives. The South American cartel's planned escalation would have fundamentally altered the conflict dynamics in contested regions. Government forces maintained control primarily through superior armored capabilities, tanks and heavy personnel carriers that cartel forces could not effectively engage. 16 Javelin systems would have eliminated that advantage, allowing the cartel to destroy government armor from concealed positions, potentially triggering wider violence and destabilizing governance across multiple provinces. Intelligence analysts projected the introduction of these weapons would have resulted in hundreds of additional casualties over the following 6 months, both military and civilian. None of these scenarios occurred. The weapons never left the intercepted vessel. The terrorist organizations never received their purchased capabilities. The planned attacks were never executed. Peacekeepers, civilians, government forces all remained safe because the investigation identified the network, tracked the operation, and intercepted the shipment before the weapons could be distributed. The prosecution phase revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. The defense contractor received a 32-year federal sentence for weapons trafficking and conspiracy. The military logistics coordinator received 28 years for theft of government property and providing material support to terrorist organizations. 4 accomplices received sentences ranging from 12 to 18 years. The shipping company executives who knowingly facilitated the transportation received 15-year terms. International arrests of network participants produced additional prosecutions in 5 countries, with combined sentences exceeding 200 years for the trafficking organization's leadership and operational personnel. Asset forfeiture operations seized $8.4 million from network accounts. Criminal proceeds from 18 months of weapons trafficking. The money was recovered before it could be used to finance additional illegal operations or fund the terrorist organizations that were intended recipients of the stolen weapons. Properties, vehicles, and equipment used to facilitate the trafficking were seized and liquidated, further disrupting any attempt to reconstitute the network's operational capabilities. Military inventory and security protocols underwent immediate review and enhancement. The falsified destruction process that had allowed systematic weapons diversion was eliminated through implementation of independent verification systems, real-time photographic documentation, and third-party oversight of all demolition operations. Chain of custody procedures for weapons scheduled for destruction were strengthened with biometric access controls and continuous surveillance. The investigation's findings led to prosecution of additional personnel who had participated in or facilitated the systematic diversion of military equipment over 18 months. ATF Trigger's investigation prevented the largest anti-tank weapons trafficking operation in recent federal law enforcement history from reaching completion. 42 Javelin systems intercepted 72 hours before delivery. 12 NLAW systems recovered before transfer. 3 separate terrorist and criminal organizations denied capabilities they planned to use for mass casualty attacks. International trafficking network dismantled across 5 countries. 197 weapon systems diverted over 18 months. accounted for, recovered, or traced to final disposition. The weapons were already loaded, already in transit, already purchased by buyers who had confirmed their attack plans. The timeline was running: 72 hours to European arrival, 6 hours to separation, 96 hours to final delivery. ATF Trigger stopped the operation, with 48 hours remaining before the shipment reached the point where recovery would become impossible. Communities remained safe, peacekeepers protected, infrastructure secured. Civilians who would have been targeted never knew how close they came to mass casualty attacks, enabled by stolen U.S. military weapons systems now recovered and secured. The investigation, the coordination, the timing. These elements prevented capabilities designed to destroy armored vehicles from reaching organizations planning to use them against unprotected civilians and critical infrastructure across 3 continents. ATF Trigger's interdiction ensured that weapons meant to kill hundreds never reached the hands of those who purchased them for exactly that purpose. This is a fictional dramatization inspired by federal weapons trafficking interdiction concepts. It does not depict any real operation, individuals, or specific case. All scenarios, numbers, and details are created for illustrative purposes to demonstrate the investigative methods and coordination used in major weapons trafficking interdictions.